All right. So still I see people are joining, but okay, let's get started. So thanks for your time, everybody. And it has been so for this particular sessions. So I personally got so many requests from many folks, many students, like, DevOps is fantastic, but what about something that we can do in terms of real productions ready use case or readiness, right? So I've taken this request very seriously, or we have taken rather. And this particular session will be 10 hours or so. The expectations of this particular session in the next few hours, so 10-hour sessions. So what we have done that we have split it into many weekend sessions, and on an average maybe 2 hours each. So today is the first day, and for each and every day we'll explain the productions use cases, some of the things that you really need to know as a DevOps guys. And also we'll do a kind of hands-on deep dive configurations processes configurations as well during this training. So today is the first day, and what I have done, I chose there's a topic called blue and green deployment. One thing is very important, everybody, for this particular course, if you don't know DevOps or first time you're hearing this term, then probably it won't work good for you, but still you can stay here, no problem, for learning. But whoever has done, or maybe whoever has done or taken a training from somewhere, or somebody working on DevOps, or they are aware about basic DevOps operation, then that would be very good value additions for them. That is some kind of prerequisites I would like to set it before we start. So this is there's a combinations today is a practical, some of the things and some of the theory portion of that. So I'll pull first a PPT, and then once the PPT is done, then I will take you to AWS. Probably you think like, okay, is it a AWS course or AWS sessions? Answer is no. But for some of the DevOps related configuration settings, I think that AWS would give you a better option in terms of the explanations perspective. So that's why I chose AWS for certain configuration like blue and green. Then maybe next week we'll discuss about some of the deep dive, like some of the other tools related stuff, right? Maybe how can you monitor your entire stack with advanced Grafana and Prometheus, a lot of things. Okay. So before I start, I need to ask a question, because these are interactive, kind of interactive sessions. It is not always one-way approach. I want you to be participate on these discussions as well. Okay. So what is blue and green deployment? You see on my screen the presentations. Anybody can take a kind of volunteer. First, let me know you hear my voice, and you can see my screen. Anybody can confirm yes? Then
Yes, we are able to hear. Yes.
Yes.
Cool. So what is blue and green deployment?
So, Dada, can decide. So, in the blue-green deployment, like we are deploying some software or updates in the environment. So, in case of blue-green deployment, existing code will be run as if we are going to deploy on the newer system. That will be approach where new code will be deployed on the other system, and the existing will run, and we will do the testing on the newer one, and when it is working fine, then we will switch to the newer code or application.
Correct, Pushpendra. You are right. So yes, so the blue and green deployment, if you understand what is blue and green deployment, I just would like to go a little bit step back here. So in a normal way, if you configure any CI/CD pipeline, right, it's a continuous integration or continuous deployment. You know, the moment your developer release something, okay, maybe a new releases or maybe bug fix releases, then there's a process called first they trigger the pipeline, something like that. Let me pull. So they will trigger the pipeline. If I go to the pipeline section from AWS, we'll explain that. And then the pipeline triggers or started saying, okay, that is your source. Maybe it's your Git or Bitbucket, that source. And then there's a build phases happen. Okay, there is a build happen, and then finally it is going to deploy to your target environment. It can be your maybe container environment, or maybe simply virtual machines environment, in our case EC2, or it can be EKS or ECS, whatever you have, right? So there is a very straightforward approach for any CI/CD pipeline. But what happened from productions environment we face, right? Your customer, they don't need any downtime these days, right? They are saying, okay, even though there is a new releases, okay, even though some of the bug fixes, or even though some of the your development team, they have done some of the kind of new, some of the releases, their application must be up and running all the time. Okay, that is the expectation from customer these days. Okay, so CI/CD everybody knows, but you now know what is blue and green deployment to satisfy your customer in terms of eliminate downtime. And how do you configure something so that your application will be running during this patching process, during this release process, not patching, release process. Okay, so let's get started with, again, the blue and green deployment PPT. So this is something here also, the same thing it is mentioned, like reduce downtime, then it's kind of clone environment, and then you can do the isolated test environment, and so on and so forth, right? And also Pushpendra explained something like the new and old sort of thing. And here you go. So what I can do that, I'll just put it on the presentation mode, and you can see my screen in a better way. So this blue and green deployment, so you see the big presentations, right? Not the small one. Again, somebody can confirm, you can see the full screen presentations.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so you can see that this is my existing environment. Okay, on top there's a load balancer here, and there's internet gateway. This is all AWS term. Absolutely fine if you are not using AWS, you are using traditional environment, or maybe you are using Azure, GCP, absolutely no problem. But the concept wise is same. So I have these virtual machines. Okay, it can be ECS or EKS also, that is Kubernetes cluster, or EC2, where my prod environment is running. So your applications are running. Okay, and maybe at the back end there's some sort of databases calling. That's okay. So production traffic served by the blue environment, that's the name. That means whatever you have, your applications running currently, let's call it blue. Make sense? So that's okay. So your application flow is going to that directions. Now in the next page, if I just move. So now your development team, they have done certain changes, right? Code changes or whatever, releases, etc. So definitely they have their own code repository. Okay, it can be Git or something like the Bitbucket. So for our case, I will use Git for the configurations perspective, configurations and all. I use Git only. Then there's a code build. Code build is nothing like from your terms Jenkins, right? Probably you've heard Jenkins. That's something it would build your codes, and then finally you can deploy. There's another tool called code deploy from AWS. But again, from your side, if you're using Jenkins, Jenkins has the competency to build as well or deploy as well at the same time. So this is something the flow, and then finally you can see there's a new green environment is getting launched, which is a newly spawned new version. When I say new version, means new code changes. So that means your customers, or your end users are still going to that directions, which is blue. Okay, but now you have got another environment, which is non-prod environment, um, that is getting launched with the green way. Okay, it's a green environment. So CI/CD pipeline creates a new code version, as I say, and new code version deployed on the non-prod environment. Okay, so far so good. Now what next? Now, so you have your own testing team, somebody called testing QA in your organizations. So if you have this kind of environment, this kind of department, so usually what they do a lot of testing, like regression testing, smoke testing, UAT environment, all stuff to make sure that the new code that your developer, they have made changes, it is workable. It is fine from functionality perspective, from logical perspective, from different perspective, it should work, right? So that is something called they do their testing. So once they are saying, or once they have said, okay, this is okay, they have approved this testing environment ready to go. So now what happened? You can see the directions now got changed from this green to blue. That means now your old non-prod environment, okay, so this is now no longer exist. So now the new directions, it would be blue. So your early direction was green. So now what happened, the moment you will declare that, okay, I've done, and now people should move to that directions, or now it is time to route my load balancer to that directions. That's something you can do when I see the configuration and show you the configuration. So once it's done, then request will go to this new fresh prod environment, which is now turned into blue. But yes, that from the database perspective side, it is same, like all of the connections there. So traffic failed over to the old green to the new blue environment. An environment running older version may be destroyed. Some of the companies, they still keep that older version, and then slowly they will terminate for their own audit purpose, something like that. But usually in most of the situation, it is getting destroyed, the older versions. So far so good. You understand the logic about the blue and green deployment. So in that case, what happened, that your applications from the end user perspective, from your customer perspective, they don't see what is going on under the hood, right? For them, they're still using abcd.com for an example, if your website so be. And then that particular whatever is happening behind the scene, for them it is kind of invisible. But when your load balancer is intelligent enough that to transfer the traffic to newly the blue environment, so your application is still up and running, but you have already released a new version after proper testing, smoke, UAT, etc. So okay, I will come to this canary deployment a little bit later. So now if I go back to AWS console, exactly I've done the same thing. So I have got this source. Okay, I'll show you in detailed configurations, each and every configuration, maybe later point of next week. But now I have got a sample, Angular applications. Okay, it's a very simple static Angular app, and you can see there's a couple of Angular scripts files, supporting files. So I have uploaded this code, and then what happened? Then there's a process called build, and then finally deploy, and then pipeline. I'll show you pipeline first. So once this entire process is done, this is the Angular app. Because this is very important, because even during the interview process, if you can explain this is right way, if you can explain, then probably your interviewer you will be always on the upper hand, like, because these actual productions use. So because these days CI/CD pipeline is very common. People, they know, right? CI/CD pipeline, DevOps is very common. But in the real production environment, blue and green deployment really help you in terms of to reduce downtime, and then these explanations in the right direction will work for you for your interview purpose as well, and even your during the exact right production environment as well. So here you can see in the deployment, if I click on the view details and the execution details, exactly the same thing I have explained right this way. So you can see the traffic shifting process. So now the new replacement has been done is now blue. Okay. And here there are a couple of processes like step 1, step 2, step 4. For each and every processes, you see there's a first step, there's a replacement instances, and then installing application and replacement instances. So what happened that when the new environment will get started, definitely your application will get installed over there, right? Your main applications. So this is something happening at step 2. At step 3 is a routing is going to the replacement instances, exactly the presentations, the pictorial presentations that I showed you, like slowly how your load balancer will route the traffic to the newly blue environment, and then finally terminating the original instances. That means your old prod is no longer exist or no longer needed, and then they are getting terminated at each and every, after that, once this replacement is done. So this is something you can see from AWS console. And also you see there's a different you know different status. So here in the detail, original replacement, and there are 3 instances. So what I've done that I'll just bring my draw.io architecture, and the same architecture will follow, and then we'll configure this blue and green environment. Okay, bear with me. I'm just launching this draw.io, which is a free architecture tool. It will be easy for you to understand. So here's the thing. So if you know AWS, so that is your AWS, and inside that definitely is a VPC, etc. Okay, let's say this is a VPC. Let's just quickly give it a name like VPC, right? And inside the VPC, you have got subnets, etc. So in interest of time, I'll not show you subnet, etc. But what I'll do, I have these 3 boxes again, and let's assume these 3 boxes are your EC2 instances. Okay. So this is your productions right now happening, right? And on top of that, you have load balance. Okay. So let's assume this circle represents your load balance, LB and LB. And now traffic is going from your end users, something like that. And it is going to different EC2 in the target group, because all you know that behind your load balancer there's a target group, and all of the requests are going to that directions. Okay, so far so good. So now there's a blue and green deployment happen. So what happened that the same, once this CI/CD process has been done, okay, maybe 3 squares also have to draw. And this is your commit, git or code commit, deploy, sorry, build, deploy, right? And let's say Now this man is your developer. It can be you as well, DevOps guy. Okay. So they will upload code, publish, push code. It will go to commit, from commit to build, and build to deploy. Pretty straightforward. Okay. So now what happened once the deployment is done, then there's an additional new instances will get launched. And yes, you are right. So these new instances will signify the green one as per our PPT, as per our presentations. Okay. So this deployment has been done on EC2. Okay, and definitely during this deployment, there's a code artifacts that we'll discuss in detail next class. The artifacts means AWS also maintains those artifacts in S3 and etc. So I'll not make it so complicated right now. So now let's say here, so you can define in the configuration like, okay, I need these 3 EC2 instances, and that is the entirely my new environment. And again, there's another gentleman. He is a QA guy this time, and he has done all his job for proper testing, okay, about your applications, whether it is okay or not, right? Now, once you declare your blue and green deployment, you have to trigger the blue and green deployment process. So what happened? That slowly, this EC2 will get created there. This EC2 will be there, little, and this EC2 will be there. And these directions will get changed, something like that, or something like that. Okay? Like that. And finally, so that is something called graceful delete or termination process. Okay. So now what happened? This is with your new code base. And for your application perspective, from your end user perspective, still it's up and running. A little bit slow, but no downtime. Okay. So yes, another problem is not problem, I should say, the observation. So during the CI/CD process, you can eliminate the slowness, but also little bit you can eliminate the complete downtime. Sorry for that, but you will see observe some kind of slowness there. Obviously, because the sum of the 1, 2, 3, 4, this way your instance will get launched. And during that time, your ELB will send the traffic to only one node, then 2 node, 3 node, Yeah. So Danish, you raised your hand.
Yes, Dada. Actually, now that I understood that ALB will redirect the traffic, so does this uh, the code deploy thing, it will also manage our load balance automatically, or that we need to create this separately?
It's a good question. So I'll show you. So you have to configure this everything load balancer along with the auto scaling. So let me go back to that one, if I understand your question correctly. So let me reload. It's locked out.
Same doubt for my side as well. Auto scaling is really required.
Um, Auto scaling, it is not required, it is not mandatory, but as I said, as a from best practice perspective, because if you don't have auto scaling, then probably there will be only one instances, right? And then the same instance during this blue and green process, then you have only one instances will get deployed. So auto scaling is not mandatory. It is needed if your application has a very high traffic and all stuff, right? It is not mandatory, Priyaranjan, Ganesh. Okay, so here we can show you certain sphere deployment. Hold on. There's artifacts deployment. I think I have to go to applications. So a couple of things I'll show you first. In the deployment sections, so here you can see that where your application is sitting. Okay, it can be GitHub or Amazon S3. That's something we'll discuss later. But if you go down, you'll see there's an option called additional deployment behavior settings. Okay, so that means here you can declare, you can retain or override the failed deployment. But here the thing, in the deployment group override sections, you'll see there's an option called deploy at all once, half of the time, or one at the time. Okay, so that means if you don't have any auto scaling, let's say if you have only one machine, then if you deploy all at once, then mean whatever the changes you have made, the same changes will get applied and the new instance will get launched in your environment. Okay, that's the one thing. So again, auto scaling is not mandatory, but it depends about your application nature and your business need. Okay, number one. If I go back to another section, I'm just trying to find that other build. If I done something there, something is not there. Hold on. Deploy applications. Okay. Discuss applications. Then pipelines. Yeah, so you cannot see any build right now because I've deleted for the build. But again, if I go to the deployment section, let's say here, right, and view one of the events. So for any deployment, there are different stages, right? If you know or if you don't know. So for this particular deployment, even for blue and green, there's a before block traffic, and after block traffic. So these steps are needed so that there will be no downtime or this kind of transition, okay, between your old one and existing one. You have to check whether that particular event got successfully done. So otherwise you will get a lot of problem and your blue and green will not work properly. This is something we'll discuss again. I'm just going here and there to show you how exactly it looks like and what are the configurations, what are the things you need to really take care of. And sorry, Danish, yeah?
Yeah, understood, Dada, understood.
Yeah, and also, and if I go back to pipeline once again, to view details, it's free. And if I go to deployment, last time deployment configuration, okay, this is some. All right, so this is the first discussion about this blue and green deployment. And now, so this section, what we'll do that we'll start from scratch. And if I go to repository, you will see there's a 2 files. Probably you know that for any CI/CD pipeline, you need to have 2 YAML files. And in AWS case, you need to have AppSec, and there's a build spec YAML. Okay, many of you will probably know. I will just open and I'll show you what are the things I have done there. So in this AppSec YAML, basically you need to define some of the stages, right? So for me, these are small Angular projects, and that would be my destinations. So destination means in my destinations location, it can be my EC2 or maybe your Docker. So that would be my location where my projects will get published. Okay, there's a work directory basically. Whoever works for the Linux, and that's a basic comment. And this is a permission that you have to set. And here also you see there's a location. There's basically it's a hooks, and these hooks will actually help you for kind of deployment. And there's a very straightforward YAML, and without that you cannot start any CI/CD in AWS. And you have if you follow your own Git and Jenkins way, traditional way, you need to have define the same kind of JSON or YAML there, right? So another repo, another file that you have to define, which is a build spec. So basically build spec where the base images, probably Alpine and Ubuntu. For our case, I have defined Node.js. That's my runtime environment because it's the Angular. And then there's a comment like how to install npm. There's a dependency, right? These are all of the dependency. And finally, you have to declare the npm install and the build. So if you are the QA guy, or maybe if you are the tester, so here you can do a lot of things. Okay, and probably you can define more during the build process, pre-build phase, right? You have to configure, is there any functional testing or some kind of testing, automated testing, right? Probably Selenium and whatever you have to do, you have to define there. And finally, when it is deployed, and this build spec YAML will get referred. So there's a two file absolutely important for this this deployment for any CI/CD or blue-green in AWS. So if I go back here, so if I have load balancer and I don't have any auto scaling, answer is yes, it will work. And then this time only one EC2, and then you have to just declare your target group there. Okay, answer is yes. So it will be very clear when I'll show you the real step-by-step configuration in next class. So in each and every area, probably we can have a deep dive discussion questions about that. That's the first use case about the blue and green. And next use case, which is canary deployment. So many of you know also what is canary. So canary is many companies, they recently they are following about this canary deployment. So this is something blue and green deployment, but here I'll show you what is canary. So this is pretty self-explanatory, right? The canary deployment is nothing like the few portion of traffic is going to non-prod, and 90% traffic is going to your prod environment, right? So anybody can do again, volunteer, try to answer why this canary deployment and when it is very interesting or important in which situation in the productions.
Yeah, to avoid the complete downtime of the application, so canary deployment is a useful use case.
Yeah, so that's the right answer, Priranjan. But slowly also you can test how your newly created environment behaves, right, after changes. So recently, we had a customer discussion when their requirement is not blue and green, but their requirement is more about the blue and green. This canary deployment, because they wanted to make sure that their new releases they are kind of bug free, or some kind of A/B splitting, right? A and B test or A/B splitting sort of. So they wanted to make sure their non-prod environment, how it behaves, And if there are any errors, that quickly they can switch back to production environment, something like that. So canary deployment, again, very well known, acceptable strategy in DevOps, I mean CI/CD overall. And it allows to export tiny traffic to the new environment, as I said, and gradually it is increase the steps to switch over completely. That is very interesting. Okay. So we'll park it right now for this. So another very interesting questions one of my customer asked a couple of weeks back. They are saying that they are using Docker. So nothing related to CI/CD, guys. It is completely different questions. Something all of a sudden came to my mind, so that I thought that I wanted to share with you. So they are saying that I have a pen drive, a USB flash drive, and all of the file systems, a particular Docker, it is there in the file system. And their question was, can they use this particular stick or USB to any computer and try to access the Docker right from there? So what do you think? Will it work or will it not work? It's very interesting, right? But actually the question came from one of the real customers. So think what my question is, again I repeat. So they are carrying a USB, and this USB, in the USB they are having all of the files related to Docker. And maybe they have a file in the sense, they have the containers, inside that, in the containers there are a lot of preset configurations over there. So now they're saying that can they use the same pen drive to any computer, and then it will start the Docker, everything will start from there, and I really don't need to install anything there on the local computer, and from the pen drive only they can use.
Now, in that case, the metadata will be different from machine to machine, right? And that system that configuration which is based to our metadata, I think those will be changed, and the drive will only having the file, right? Actual OS and configuration, it is in some other volume, right? So it should be taken care from there. So I think it will not run.
Okay. Anybody else? What do you think? Okay, I will answer. The first thing, it will not work because see what happened for Docker thing. You should have a Docker installed on somewhere, because the computing your pen drive will not serve. You need to have the daemon, which is Docker engine. Something should be there in your machine, okay, at your whatever, computer. And then if you install or connect your pen drive, then you can use your file system from pen drive to Docker. That is possible. So it will be working as a mount drive for your Docker. Okay. So your entire containers, all of the configurations still there in your pen drive. It works. But you need to have a Docker engine to initiate. And then from the Docker, you can point or mount your USB stick, so that then it will work. So it's kind of partial answer that it will work, it will not work, depending on if you have the Docker installed. If you have Docker installed, then yes, your pen drive will work. Okay, nothing related to this discussion, something very interesting question, so that I thought. Okay, next use case. I don't have any PPT for there. Another very interesting use case, I'll try to answer if you are using, handling DevOps operations. So a customer is trying to pull an image from their container registry. Okay, it can be CR or somewhere, maybe even it's let's say Docker Hub, right? But their DevOps team, they have experienced that particular image is very heavy. Very heavy. It's a 11 GB of file. It's a real things I'm sharing with you. And the 11 GB file, every time it is downloading from Docker Hub or maybe ECR, and then it will execute it. It's kind of a long process, and ultimately their process is getting delayed in terms of the new development and something from their own perspective is very delayed thing. So what do you think? Why their images are so big? Enter Docker Hub images, because what they're using is a very tiny applications. But yes, there's a lot of insights parameter. Okay, there's a lot of dependency. That's okay, but their main total file is more than 11 GB. Think and try to answer. So you understand my questions, right? I mean, what I'm trying to explain here. So if you pull any images from Docker Hub, okay, your container registry, so then you should have a baseline images, right? It can be Ubuntu, it can be Alpine, so whatever it can be, right? And then what you have to do, you have to full lot of different parameters, like maybe it's a Docker compose, and all of the parameters you have to define. But it cannot be so big, 11 15 GB. It can be big, but not all the time, because for them it's a very tiny application. It's not hugely complicated applications. Okay, the answer is their base image itself very big. Okay, and inside there they have done in the main parameter, they have so many duplicated what should I say, duplicated parameter, and whenever somebody pulls that particular images, so the overall image is higher, bigger, because of their baseline images, as well as their lot of duplicacy parameter causes the big image, because these kind of things you will get in your real production environment. So whenever customer complains that it takes so long to pull any images from my container registry, first check their images size, and if the images can be reduced. Okay, that's a very common problem in industry, in the productions. Okay, so if you are not expert to fine tune and reduce their images size, then probably you can work with their application team, because maybe it is not your job, or maybe if you know some coding and some kind of understand different parameter, etc. Then probably you can work with their development team, and then you can do that.
Dada, in that case, the only thing that can be optimized is the parameter which is a duplicate, or maybe the dependencies has been in the duplicate. They have, while they have created the image, they have kept the dependency twice. But how we can reduce the base image from which it has been created?
Yes. So base image in 90% probably you cannot reduce, but if they're using very outdated images, and there's a lot of vulnerability image, something then your overall images size will be higher than normal size, because each and every base image they keep on releasing their new releases, right? So check that they are using the latest releases of the base images, or they are using a right images for their workload. Most of the times you cannot reduce your base images, but sometimes I've seen that improper old version of images causes a significant this problem. And rightly you said that other parameters anyways they are to reduce further, I mean during their the image creation process. Clear, right, Pushpendra? I'm just checking if I
Yes, Dada.
okay. This is not related to this. This is fully AWS related. Okay, that is something we have discussed. So now, okay, I'm trying to create, in interest of time, probably we have some time, trying to create uh, here something that I can show you. Just here. Oops. Yeah. Build. Yeah. So inside AWS, when you are creating this blue and green or CI/CD, first definitely need to give a project name. Let's say DevOps prod ready, something like that. And you have to define your source, right? Source means where from where this build will get initiated. In our case, it's a code commit. Code commit is nothing like your GitHub. So the same kind of syntax it is there, it supports. So let's say it's a code commit, and the repository for our case is AB3 final. And if you have branches, then you have to define branch, master, or if you have a different branch. So for me, it's let's say master. And or I think okay, let it be there. So now what would be your environment? So what happened for any cloud? Okay, it can be AWS or Azure. I don't know about GCP about that, but for AWS, at least what happened whenever you create the build, there's a temporary EC2 instances are getting launched at backend. So it's a one-time job. So every time you build, okay, a temporary EC2 creates, okay, and does all of this building process. For your traditional workload, what happened that you really need to have Jenkins all the time. You use or you don't use. But that's a very interesting, cost saving options there. So that is there that whenever you generates or releases or triggers any pipeline, then that point of time only this environment will get created. And once it's done, then it is discarded. It's a very good thing here in cloud. So in our case, it's EC2 will get created, and for this kind of build process, exactly it is showing the same thing. And now what would be the operating system? Operating system means here there are two operating systems supported, like Amazon Linux and Ubuntu. Again, don't get confused. It is only for build. It is not for your deployment. Okay, so that's why Linux will get used for this building process. Okay, all of the backend process, and that is their images. You have this code build images, etc. I'm just going to show you some of the very high level thing, and then you have to define the build spec file. So the build spec file, it is stored in your repository, right? Which is I've already shown you the build spec.yaml. Without that, you cannot continue. So build spec.yaml. So don't worry, we'll have a end-to-end hands-on configuration next week. And then here, okay, I don't have, and there's a little bit logs you have to define, and then you have to create your build project. Without build project, you cannot go further. Okay, so once this build project done, something that I've done for something here for another projects, and then you'll see all of the different report, etc. So if I go to build project, then I think it is already gone there. Let me see. Yeah, so it's a build spec. You see there's a build spec, you can change. There's artifacts, and then there's a logs. So once this build done, then there's a deployment. So if you go to deployment and create application once again, let's say DevOps prod ready. So I'm going to deploy on EC2, as I said, if you refer to this architecture. So I'm going to deploy on EC2. So you have to define your platform like EC2 or on-premises. So you can also use this AWS code deploy for on-premises virtual machine as well. For my case, our case is EC2, and then create application. Okay, and then you have to create the deployment group. So without deployment group, it will not work. So as a part of the processes, like, first you have to create this project and then deployment group. And here you have to define a lot of things. So let's say in the deployment group is DevOps prod ready. Let's give it a name. You need to have a service role that I've already created. I'll show you how to do that. And now you see there's a blue and green options. So in place means there's a no blue and green environment. So in place means whatever you have, it will just override and there's a downtime. Okay. But blue and green, the moment you choose blue and green, then you see there's an option called automatically copy Amazon EC2 auto scaling group or manually provision instances. So you can see now, Priyaranjan, to answer your question, that it is not mandatory for blue and green that you have auto scaling or not auto scaling. It's always better option to have auto scaling, because auto scaling, you don't need to pay additional money, right? Because auto scaling itself doesn't have any cost. But whenever the high load will come, then automatically it will increase by additional instances. For that additional instances, you have to pay for those additional instances. But it's your choice. In most of the companies, they use auto scaling. But yeah, if you don't use, then manually provision instances and simply go to Amazon EC2 instances, and you need to define the tag. Tag is super important. Without tag, your code deployment won't understand on which servers they have to deploy. It's very common sense, right? Because you have to define, maybe you have a application productions tab. Maybe you have a non-prod tab, maybe dev, QA, whole lot of different tab. So you have to define a proper tagging mechanism here. And then I don't know, I have a tag there or something like that. So, okay. And then you can deploy here. For me, it is auto scaling. So you have to choose the auto scaling options. So I've deleted auto scaling. That's why it is showing nothing. And now there's another interesting thing, like reroute traffic immediately, or I will choose whether to reroute traffic. Pushpendra, yes, you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Dada, in the previous option, you have chosen the EC2. If we go with the Lambda, so it will be cost effective one, because the Lambda will be the based on that time it will run, as comparison to EC2, it will be cost effective. What your thought on that part?
So see, Lambda, it has its own limitation. It will not run after 15 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
So if your build process will take more than 15 minutes, then Lambda will not work for sure. Okay. So that is case to case basis. But in most of the cases, this EC2 even is not very costly. It is very small. T2 server will get provision. Okay. And if you go to AWS pricing calculator and see AWS, I'm just showing you. So again, this is not about AWS class, but I'm just showing you, this AWS because of it would be easy for you to deploy, right? So if you go to AWS pricing calculator and just simply code deploy or code build, probably, right? Code build. A code build. And it depends. So let's say if your job will run for 10 minutes, then it will cost you 15 cents only. Let's say if your job will run for 30 minutes, then it's only 45 cents. So very economical, right? You can try it out. Lambda, I have never tested Lambda, but maybe Lambda also will work for that. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So that is the thing. Now, I was explaining about this traffic rerouting. Many companies, they reroute traffic immediately, or somebody, okay, they are saying, okay, no, what I can do, I will choose whether the traffic route to traffic, reroute to traffic maybe at the midnight or after one day. So you can define, when the traffic reroute traffic immediately. It is a very good choice because as I said that if your test or tester or QA, they are 100% sure that their traffic, everything is fine, fantastic as per expectations, your applications works perfectly fine, then reroute traffic immediately will good choice. But some of the companies, they still choose a particular time for this traffic. And this load balancer, okay, there's another thing like, as I said, deployment at once or half a time and one at a time. That means if I go back to this one, and let's go back to the same song and dance about this thing. So they are saying that these three systems will be there, and all of everything will be done at the same time, or there's a graceful manner, like half of the instances of three, maybe one and a half, two machines will get launched, but still it will be here. And then once it's done, they will get deleted first, and then it will be there, and then the old one will get deleted first. So that combination also you can define from here, this percentage wise of the number of, how many numbers, that's something your call. I'm just showing you all of the different options. And then finally, you have to choose load balancer again. Somebody asked these questions, Priya Ranjan, maybe still he's here, that again, it is not mandatory that you should have load balancer, but if you have auto scaling, load balancer is a good combination. So then you have to choose your load balancer and the target group, which target group that the new system will get deployed. If I go back again and create another rectangle this time, so that means you have a target group behind the load balancer, correct? So okay.
Yeah.
And then you have to choose the particular target group so that your new EC2 will understand that the same target group, so that your load balancer will understand, okay, in that target group, I know which one is my target group, and I know which are the new EC2 instances are there, and I know when the traffic to be there. So that's why you need this target group set. That's all for today. So what we have learned in today's session, we have learned that what is blue and green deployment, how effective it would be for your real production environment, how can we eliminate the downtime, and also we have discussed a few minutes about how to reduce the image sizes in terms of the ECR pooling mechanism, or the pooling mechanism is very high. Little bit pop quiz that we discussed about the USB pen drive, how can you use USB pen drive for your Docker, whether it will work or not work, and what is canary deployment. At the same time, next week or maybe next lecture, we'll discuss and see the end-to-end configurations about the blue and green using EC2. Any questions? Any suggestions?
So no, just discussion. So in Azure pipelines, Azure DevOps, right? We have the option for the serverless deployment as well, like this one, Azure services deployment, right? Wherein you can deploy the code in your servers. So here also we can use the something.
Yeah. So,
right?
So your entire code pipeline, code, artifacts, code commit, these are all serverless, right? There's no server. If you go to code commit, let's see if I go to code commit, let's cancel it. So for you, it is serverless. There's no servers. All you need to do that you have to push your code from your local Git to this repository. But inside there's what about the servers or not server, we don't know. But there's the serverless for you, right? Even for building, even for your pipeline. So for you it's serverless, right? The same thing here. You can deploy in AWS Fargate using the same method. So Fargate is serverless, so that your deployment can be also serverless. Yeah.
So in this pipeline, do we have some unit testing?
Yeah, definitely. So in the build process, you can enable. So as I said, in this deployment YAML, so if you go to this code, right, you will see there's a deployment, build spec YAML. In this build spec, you have to define your parameters, phases. They're called phases, right? You can see there's a phases, right? Now where you have to do what. Okay, so you have to define, those testing, maybe Selenium or whatever the testing you can define here
Right.
in this YAML. When if you go to abstract YAML, actually. You can do, yeah. All right, so I think, what do you think that this kind of sessions would be helpful for you long run? And I think, okay, I got a thumbs up.
One more thing, just one question is this regarding these load balancers, which actually divert the traffic. What kind of load balance are these? Are these? Can you give me some examples like what the main is it a Apache load balancer or
Okay.
what is it exactly?
See, AWS, they don't tell you what the backend load balancer they are using. Maybe they are using hardware load balancer, and they it's a kind of logical load balancer as well. But this is a scalable, highly manageable load balancer, because load balancer will give you almost 100% SLA. Okay. So you
Right.
really don't need to take care of the load balancer downtime availability. So it's out of the box. It has a 100%, almost 100% SLA, right? But at the back end, what technology they are using, what different product they are using, that is their secret sauce. Okay. So I don't know who is asking. I can simply tab, but but that's the answer to your question.
Thanks.
Okay, guys. Thanks. So next week, probably we'll have another 1.5 hour session. This time a little big, because each and every configuration we'll discuss, and I'll show you the setup process about this blue and green as well. Thanks for your time. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thanks, Dada. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dev. Yeah.
Thanks, Dada.